What he did next shocked everyone. He found her in his bed just before dawn, a place only 5 people in the world had access to. The bruise on her jaw was fresh. She had no idea who he really was, no idea what a man like Julian Vance could do without raising his voice, or leaving a trace. But here's what she'll never know. While she slept in his bed thinking she'd be fired by morning, he was already making calls. Quiet calls, the kind that end careers and destroy reputations. Because the maid who'd crawled into his private suite, looking for one safe hour, was about to get a lot more than that. And because what happens in the next 72 hours will prove that the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun, it's power wielded in silence. Julian Vance stepped into his penthouse suite at 4 in the morning and stopped in the doorway. The room was dark except for the city lights pressing silver through floor-to-ceiling windows. The air smelled faintly of lavender cleaning solution, and there was a woman asleep in his bed. He didn't move, didn't reach for the light switch, just stood there with his coat still buttoned, eyes adjusting to the half-dark, watching her breathe. She was young, mid-20s maybe, curled beneath his white sheets with her dark hair fanned across his pillow. Her body was small against the expanse of the king bed, positioned in a way that made her look like she was trying to take up as little space as possible even in sleep. Her uniform had been folded neatly on the chair beside the nightstand. The crisp white blouse and black pencil skirt of the housekeeping staff, placed with the kind of care that suggested habit rather than thought. Her shoes sat beneath the chair, aligned perfectly. Her gold name tag caught what little light bled through the curtains. Harper. Julian closed the door behind him with the kind of silence that only came from years of moving through rooms where noise meant death. The penthouse occupied the entire 47th floor of the Vance Tower in Chicago. It didn't appear on any booking system, didn't show on any floor plan. The elevator required a biometric key that fewer than 6 people in the world possessed. No one entered this room without his knowledge. No one. And yet here she was. He crossed the room slowly, footsteps soundless on the hardwood floor. She didn't wake. Up close he could see things he hadn't noticed before. The slight puffiness around her eyes from crying. The faint bruise along her jawline, half hidden by the fall of her hair against the pillow. The way her fingers twitched in her sleep, curling and uncurling against the sheets, as though even in dreams she was trying to hold on to something that kept slipping away. Her breathing was too fast for someone truly at rest. Her pulse fluttered visibly in her throat. Even unconscious, her body hadn't relaxed. It remained coiled, ready, waiting for something to go wrong. Julian recognized that posture. He'd seen it in men who'd spent years in prison, in people who'd learned through repetition that safety was a lie, and stillness was the only armor they had left. He lowered himself into the armchair across from the bed, settling into the leather with the patience of a man who had learned that waiting was its own kind of weapon. He was 45 years old, built like controlled violence, 6'2" with broad shoulders and silver threading through dark hair. Grey eyes that missed nothing, and revealed nothing in return. Her eyes opened 17 minutes later. For a moment, she simply stared at the ceiling, disoriented, caught between sleep and waking. Then her gaze shifted, traveling across the unfamiliar room, and landed on the man sitting motionless in the chair beside the window. She sat up so fast, the sheets tangled around her legs. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to fall asleep. I just needed to lie down for a minute. I swear I was going to leave before breathe." The word was quiet. Not a command, an offering. Harper's chest heaved. Her eyes were wide, darting between him and the door, calculating distances, measuring threats. But she didn't run. She sat frozen in his bed, her hair wild around her face, her hands gripping the sheets like they were the only thing keeping her tethered to earth. "I know who you are," she whispered. "I know this is your room. I'll go right now. Please, I need this job." "I can't." Her voice cracked. Julian remained still. "How did you get in?" The question caught her off guard. She'd been bracing for anger, for threats, for cold dismissal. A simple question asked without heat, without judgment, was not what she'd expected. "The service corridor," she said. "Behind the east stairwell, there's a panel that's supposed to be sealed, but the lock's been broken for months. It leads to the maintenance access behind the kitchenette." She swallowed. "I found it by accident a few weeks ago. I just needed somewhere quiet. Somewhere no one would look." Julian filed away the information. Someone would answer for that oversight tomorrow. But his expression remained unchanged. "Are you all right?" Harper blinked. "What? You've been crying for hours by the look of it. The bruise on your jaw is fresh within the last few hours. You didn't have it when you started your shift." He paused. "So I'm asking, are you all right?" She stared at him like he'd spoken in a language she didn't recognize. "You noticed me before tonight. I notice everyone who works in my building." It was the truth. Julian made it his business to know every employee's face. Knowledge was control. Control was power. And power in his world was the only thing that kept you alive. Her hand rose almost involuntarily to touch the bruise she'd tried so hard to hide. "I'm fine," she said. "That's not what I asked. She exhaled, shaky. "It's been a long night. I can see that." He leaned forward slightly. "Do you need help?" The question landed like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples spread across her face. Confusion, suspicion, something that might have been hope before she locked it away. "Help with what?" With whatever put that bruise on your face. With whatever made you climb 47 floors through a service corridor to sleep in a stranger's bed because you had nowhere else to go. Harper's jaw tightened. It's nothing. I fell. In the stairwell. I was tired and wasn't paying attention. Harper, her name, spoken quietly, stopped her mid-lie. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time, and something in her expression shifted. Not trust, not hope. Something smaller and more fragile, like the first hairline crack in a wall that had been holding back water for years. You don't have to tell me, Julian said. But you don't have to lie either. Not here. She was silent for a long moment. Then she looked down at her hands, still tangled in his sheets. I should go home. The word home came out of her mouth like a stone. She was forcing herself to swallow. Julian watched her gather herself, untangling from the sheets, reaching for her uniform, her movements quick and practiced. She'd done this before many times, pulling herself together in the aftermath of something she would never name. Are you married? Harper's hands stilled on the buttons of her blouse. She didn't turn around. She stood there with her back to him, her spine rigid, her fingers frozen in place. Yes, the word was barely audible. Does your husband know where you are? A long pause. No, he went out. After. He always goes out after. I have a few hours before he comes back. After. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with everything she wasn't saying. Julian let the silence stretch. And if you're not there when he returns? Harper's laugh was short and bitter. Then I'd better have a really good story. She finished buttoning her blouse, smoothing the fabric with hands that only trembled slightly. When she finally turned to face him, her expression had closed off completely. That flat survival mask sliding back into place like armor she'd worn so long, it had become a second skin. Thank you, she said, for not calling security. For not, I violated your privacy. If you need to fire me, I'm not going to fire you. She blinked. I'm sorry, you needed somewhere safe. Julian rose from the chair, but didn't move toward her, keeping the same measured distance between them. You found one. That's not a crime. Harper stared at him for a long moment, her brow furrowed like she was trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. People did not speak to her this way. People did not offer her grace without expecting something in return. I don't understand, she said softly. You don't have to. He crossed to the small bar near the window and poured a glass of water from the crystal carafe. He set it on the nightstand beside the bed, close enough for her to reach, far enough that she wouldn't feel cornered. Drink something before you go. You've been crying for hours. You're dehydrated. Harper's hand trembled as she reached for the glass. She drank, and Julian watched her throat move as she swallowed, watched the way her eyes closed for just a moment as the cool water hit her system. He filed away another piece of the puzzle. There was this woman who had somehow found her way into his bed. 3 days passed before Julian saw her again. He pulled her personnel file on the second day. Harper Walsh, 25 years old, hired 18 months ago as junior housekeeper, promoted to senior staff within 8 months. Unusually fast. Performance reviews uniformly excellent, attentive to detail, professional demeanor, never complains, never calls in sick. Emergency contact, Trevor Walsh, husband. Same address in modest apartment complex on the north side. Julian requested a background check on Trevor Walsh. Results came back within 6 hours. Trevor Walsh was 32. Regional sales manager for medical supply distribution company. Bachelor's degree from mid-tier state school. Drove leased Audi that cost more than his salary justified. Gym membership used 4 times weekly. Credit card balance near limit. Savings rarely exceeded $4,000. On paper, aggressively ordinary. But paper only told part of the story. No police reports filed against him. No restraining orders. No documented violence. However, 3 women had dated him before Harper. Names appearing in corners of old social media posts. Backgrounds of photos since deleted. Julian's people tracked them down one by one. 2 refused to speak. The 3rd woman, named Melissa, who'd moved to Oregon and changed her last name, agreed to phone call only after assurance Trevor would never know. She talked for 45 minutes. When call ended, Julian sat alone in office for long time, staring at city lights through window, hands folded in lap, expression utterly still. He found Harper again on 3rd night, not in his suite. She was too smart to return to same hiding place. Instead, she was in basement service corridor, sitting on overturned supply crate in corner, where security cameras couldn't reach. Knees drawn up, face buried in arms, not crying, simply sitting there, breathing, existing in only space where no one could see her. Julian watched from shadows for a long moment, before stepping into light. You found the blind spot. Harper's head snapped up. Eyes went wide, then weary. Then after long assessing pause, simply tired. There are blind spots everywhere if you look hard enough, she said. Most people just don't bother to look. Julian inclined his head, acknowledging truth of it. Mind if I sit? She stared at him. No one asked her permission for anything. Question itself seemed to confuse her, like word in language she'd once spoken, but since forgotten. It's your building. That's not what I asked. Long pause. Yeah, sure, sit. He lowered himself onto crate across from her, leaving several feet of space between them. Corridor was cold, smelled faintly of industrial cleaner. Fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting faces in alternating shadow and sickly yellow light. You haven't slept, he observed. Neither have you. Fair enough. He leaned back against concrete wall. Insomnia. Had it since I was kid. What do you do when you can't sleep? Walk the building. Check on things. Make sure everything's where it's supposed to be. And is it tonight? Julian considered the question. No, something's off. Harper's hands tightened on knees. Look, if this is about the other night, it's not. Because I meant what I said. I won't go back up there. Harper, voice quiet but firm. This isn't about the room. This is about you. She went still. What about me? I want to know if you're okay. Actually okay. Not the version you tell everyone so they'll stop asking. Silence stretched between them. Why do you care? Genuine question. Not hostile, not suspicious, just confused. Like she genuinely couldn't understand why a man like him would waste time on a woman like her. I'm not sure, Julian admitted. Maybe I'm just tired of pretending I don't see things. Harper studied him for a long moment. Jaw tight, eyes guarded, but somewhere beneath all that armor, something flickered. I'm married, she said finally. I know, my husband. She stopped, started again. He's not a bad person. Julian said nothing. I know that sounds crazy after the other night, but he's not. He has a temper. Things get out of hand sometimes, but it's not his fault. Not really. He's under pressure at work, and I don't always make things easier. And sometimes I say things that make him hit you. Words hung in air. Harper flinched like he'd slapped her. He doesn't. It's not like that. It's not abuse. He just loses control sometimes. What's the difference? The difference is that he loves me. Voice cracked. He loves me, and he's sorry every time, and he swears it won't happen again. And I believe him. I have to believe him. Julian let her words settle. Why? Because if I don't, she pressed heels of hands against eyes. If I don't believe him, then what does that make me? Some stupid girl who married a monster. Some pathetic victim who can't leave. That's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. So instead, you tell yourself it's your fault. Harper lowered hands. Eyes red-rimmed, but no tears fell. Isn't it easier that way? Easier for who? She didn't answer. They sat in silence. Fluorescent light continued rhythmic flicker. Somewhere in distance, service elevator hummed to life, then fell still. Building breathed around them. All 47 floors, all guests and staff and secrets, all lives unfolding behind closed doors. My mother used to stay too, Harper said suddenly. Voice quieter now, softer, like speaking to herself as much as to him. With my dad, same kind of temper. She'd clean up mess, put on makeup, tell everyone she was clumsy. I used to hate her for it. Bitter smile crossed face. Swore I'd be different. Was so sure I'd never end up like her. Funny how that works out. You're not your mother. No, Harper looked at him. Then why am I sitting in basement, in middle of night, instead of going home? Because some part of you knows the truth. And what truth is that? Julian held her gaze. That love isn't supposed to leave bruises. Her face crumpled. You don't understand, she whispered. It wasn't always like this. When we first met, he was everything. Kind and funny and thoughtful. Made me feel special. Made me feel like I mattered. Then slowly, so slowly I didn't even notice, it started to change. Thought he was helping me be better. She paused. By time it turned into this, I didn't know how to leave. Still don't. That's by design, Julian said quietly. People like your husband don't start with violence. They start with love. Make you need them before they show you what they really are. By time you see it, you're so tangled up that leaving feels impossible. Harper was quiet for a moment. You sound like you've dealt with this before. I've dealt with a lot of things. She looked down at hands. He proposed to me in a stairwell. New Year's Eve. His friend's rooftop party. Elevator was broken, so we had to walk up 12 flights. We were laughing so hard we could barely breathe. When we got to landing on 11th floor, he just stopped. Got down on one knee right there. Fireworks started going off outside, and he looked up at me and said I was most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Voice broke. I said yes before he finished asking. Thought I was luckiest person alive. And now? Harper closed eyes. Now I don't know what to think. Julian stood. Employee break room on 12th floor is supposed to be locked between midnight and 6, but lock's been broken for few weeks. Security cameras rotate every 20 minutes. Gap between 1:15 and 1:20. Room's got couch. Not most comfortable, but it's quiet. Harper looked up at him, confusion flickering across face. Why are you telling me this? Julian considered question. Because everyone deserves a place where they can breathe, he said. Even if it's only for few minutes. He turned and walked away, footsteps echoing softly down empty corridor. Behind him, Harper remained on crate, watching him go, expression caught somewhere between confusion and something that might in another life have been beginning of hope. Over the following weeks, Julian began dismantling Trevor Walsh. Not quickly. Quick would be visible, leave fingerprints, create martyrs. Julian preferred the slow approach. Remove ground from beneath man's feet, 1 inch at a time. So gradually, he doesn't realize he's sinking until water's over his head. First piece, financial. Trevor's job depended on relationships, commission-based sales to hospitals and clinics. His income fluctuated based on contracts he could close each quarter. Remarkable how easily charming man could become uncomfortable one. Word here, rumor there, suggestion dropped casually into right conversation, that Trevor Walsh might not be entirely trustworthy, that his numbers didn't quite add up, that someone had heard things about how he treated his wife. Nothing specific, nothing actionable, just enough to make people hesitate. Within month, Trevor's closing rate dropped 30%. Within 2 months, manager called him in for performance review that was really warning. Trevor came home from that meeting and put fist through bathroom door. Harper told co-worker she'd tripped on rug. Second piece, social. Trevor had cultivated careful image over years. Successful salesman, devoted husband, guy who always picked up check, remembered everyone's birthday. He had friends from college, work, gym. Kind of man other men wanted to grab beer with, kind women found charming and safe. Julian understood how much work went into maintaining that kind of image. He understood how fragile it was. Rumors began small. Someone mentioned to someone else that Trevor had gotten aggressive with bartender at happy hour. Someone else mentioned his wife always seemed nervous when he was around. Third person recalled incident at party, something they hadn't thought much of at time. But now that they were thinking about it, none of it concrete, all of it damning. All of it damning. Trevor's friends began pulling back. Not overtly, still answered texts, showed up occasionally. But invitations came less frequently. Conversations grew shorter. Warmth that had always surrounded him began to cool, degree by imperceptible degree. He noticed. Of course he noticed. He came home from cancelled golf outing and accused Harper of spreading lies about him. She swore she hadn't told anyone anything. He didn't believe her. Bruise she wore to work next day was on ribs where no one could see. Third piece was most delicate. Julian learned through network that Trevor's company was under federal scrutiny for pricing irregularities. Minor thing kind that happened in medical supply industry all time. Kind that usually resulted in fine and promised to do better. But federal investigations could be expanded, could be redirected, could be focused with right pressure, in right places on specific individuals, who might have cut corners, or looked other way. Julian made calls, spoke to people who owed him favors, people in agencies and offices, people who understood information was currency, and cooperation was survival. He didn't ask for anything illegal, simply suggested Trevor Walsh's expense reports deserved closer look, that travel records might reveal inconsistencies, that relationships with certain clients might be worth examining. Investigation began quietly. Trevor didn't know yet, but he would. Through all this, Julian continued encountering Harper. Not intentionally, or at least not explicitly, but building was his domain, and he moved through it constantly, and she was always there, folding towels, restocking supply closets, moving through halls with head down, shoulders tight. She looked tired, always tired now. But there were moments, brief, fragile moments, when something else broke through. When she would pause in work and stare out window at city, expression softening into something that looked almost like longing. When she would laugh at something co-worker said, real laugh, genuine and bright, and then catch herself and let mask slide back into place. Julian watched these moments from distance, said nothing, asked nothing, simply made sure break room on 12th floor remained accessible. That schedule allowed Harper to take breaks without interruption. That no one asked too many questions about nights when she clocked out late and clocked in early. It was not enough. He knew it was not enough. But it was what he could offer without pushing her further into arms of man who was hurting her. One night, he found her on service stairwell between 8th and 9th floors. She was sitting on steps, with back against wall, phone in hands, tears streaming silently down face. Julian hesitated. He'd learned over years there were moments when presence was gift, and moments when it was intrusion. He'd learned to read difference in set of someone's shoulders, angle of their head, quality of their silence. Harper's silence was kind, that wanted to be alone. He turned to go. Do you ever think about who you'd be if things had gone differently? Her voice stopped him. He turned back. Harper was still staring at phone, but tears had slowed. Voice was distant, like she was speaking to herself as much as to him. I used to have all these plans before Trevor. I was going to travel, see the world. Had this list of places I wanted to go. Tokyo, Paris, Barcelona. Was saving money from every paycheck. Had jar in my closet with little slips of paper, each one with city written on it. Was going to pull one out at random and just go. She paused. Trevor found the jar a few months after we got married. Thought it was stupid. Said we had responsibilities now. Adult things to worry about. He threw jar away. Julian lowered himself onto step below her, keeping careful distance. What happened to the money? Joint account. Harper smiled, but there was no humor in it. For emergencies. He said we needed to be practical. She shook head. I wanted to make him happy. Wanted to be good wife. That's all I ever wanted, to be good enough. You were always good enough. She looked at him sharply. You don't know that. I know that no amount of perfection would have changed who he is. I know the goalposts moved every time you thought you'd figured out the rules. I know nothing you could have done differently would have made him treat you with respect you deserve. Harper's face crumpled. Then why does it feel like my fault? Because he taught you to believe it was. Because that's how control works. It rewrites reality until you can't remember what was true before. She was quiet for a long moment. I keep thinking about leaving, she whispered. Every night when I can't sleep, I lie there and imagine packing bag, walking outdoor, never looking back. But every time I try to actually do it, I freeze, like there's wall in my head. Something pulls me back. That's normal, Julian said. Leaving someone like Trevor is one of the hardest things a person can do. Psychological bonds are complicated. Fear is real. Practical obstacles are overwhelming. Doesn't make you weak that you haven't left. Makes you human. My mother never left. Stayed until my father died. Heart attack when I was 22. Harper's voice was flat. After funeral, she told me she'd been planning to leave him for years, but she kept waiting for right moment. It never came. She looked down at phone. I don't want to wake up 20 years from now and realize I spent whole life waiting. Then don't. It's not that simple. No, Julian agreed. It's not, but it is possible. Not today maybe, not tomorrow, but eventually, when you're ready. What if I'm never ready? Then you find other ways to survive. You carve out moments of peace wherever you can. You protect parts of yourself he can't touch, and maybe one day something shifts. Something inside you, or outside you. And door that seemed impossible to open is suddenly right there. Harper looked at him. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's also not as complicated as he wants you to believe. He paused. Hardest part isn't leaving. Hardest part is giving yourself permission to want something different. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. And when you get that permission, you walk through the door, Julian said quietly, and you don't look back. The moment came in March. Phone call Trevor received Tuesday morning, informing him federal investigation into his company had been expanded to include his personal financial records. Not under arrest, not charged, but his name was now part of official inquiry. In Trevor's world, where image was everything, that was almost worse. Julian watched the unraveling from distance. Trevor's colleagues began distancing themselves. Clients stopped returning calls. Manager put him on administrative leave, pending outcome of investigation. Polite way of saying he was no longer welcome in office. The RD was repossessed in April. Gym membership lapsed. Carefully constructed image of success that Trevor had spent a decade building began collapsing under weight of suspicion, rumor, fear. Harper noticed the changes. How could she not? Trevor came home earlier now. Drank more. Paced apartment, like a caged animal. Ranting about conspiracies, betrayals, enemies trying to destroy him. His anger, always simmering, began boiling over in new ways. He accused Harper of working with his enemies, of spying on him, of planning to leave just when he needed her most. She denied everything, tried to soothe him, to calm him, to be the perfect wife he demanded. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. Breaking point came on Thursday night, in late April. Harper arrived at work with split lip, and story about walking into cabinet door. Julian saw her in lobby. Their eyes met for just a moment, long enough for him to see the fear there, the exhaustion, the silent plea for something she couldn't name. He said nothing, walked past without word. But that night, he made phone call. The call was to a woman named Theodora, who ran non-profit organization, providing emergency services for domestic violence survivors. Organization was funded in part by anonymous donor, who'd been giving substantial sums for 5 years. Julian told Theodora that woman named Harper might be calling soon. Not ready to leave yet, but close. When she was ready, she would need immediate help, without questions, without judgment, without bureaucracy. Theodora said she understood. She would be waiting. Harper called the hotline on Friday night in May. She didn't know her name had been given in advance. Didn't know woman who answered had been briefed on her situation. Only knew she'd dialed number on card. She'd found tucked into break room couch cushion. Card that hadn't been there yesterday. Woman on phone was kind. Didn't ask why Harper had waited so long. Didn't ask what had finally pushed her to call. Simply asked what Harper needed. When Harper said, "I don't know. I just can't do this anymore," woman said, "That's enough. That's all you need to know right now. We'll figure out rest together." The shelter was in quiet neighborhood outside city. Looked like ordinary house. Little worn, little cramped, but clean and warm and full of smell of something cooking in kitchen. Harper arrived with single bag and clothes on her back. She slept for 14 hours the first night. When she woke, she found cup of tea on nightstand and note that said, "Take your time. There's no rush here." She didn't return to hotel. Called supervisor and resigned, apologizing for short notice, offering to forfeit final paycheck. Supervisor Margaret, who'd worked at Vance Tower for 20 years, told her not to be ridiculous. Final check would be mailed to whatever address she provided. If she ever needed reference, she had one. Harper cried when she hung up the phone. She was doing a lot of crying lately, but tears felt different now. They felt like something washing away. Divorce proceedings began in June. Trevor contested everything. Every piece of furniture, every bank account, every detail of life they'd built together. But Trevor was also drowning. Federal investigation had expanded again. His former employer had quietly settled with government, but Trevor's personal liability remained unresolved. His lawyers were expensive. His options were limited. His rage, which had always been turned inward toward Harper, was now turned outward toward world that refused to give him what he believed he deserved. By September, it was over. Harper walked out of courthouse with nothing but her freedom and piece of paper that said she was no longer bound to man who had hurt her. It was the only piece of paper that had ever mattered. Harper moved to small town in upstate New York. Found job at bed and breakfast. Tiny place, nothing like Vance Tower, but clean and quiet and hers. She learned to bake bread from owner, elderly woman named Astrid, who asked no questions, and offered endless cups of coffee. She got library card. Adopted grey tabby she named Phantom, because of way he appeared silently at her feet, whenever she was sad. She started writing in journal. Just few lines at first, then pages, then notebooks full of thoughts she'd never allowed herself to think. Feelings she'd never allowed herself to feel. She was learning slowly how to be person again. One evening in late October, she received letter. No return address, no signature, just single sheet of paper with few words typed in plain black ink. The break room on the 12th floor has been officially closed for renovation. The couch has been moved to employee lounge on 3rd floor. Coffee machine there is new. Someone said it makes excellent espresso. Harper stared at letter for long time. She thought about man who'd found her sleeping in his bed, who'd told her about blind spots and broken locks and rooms where she could breathe, who'd spoken to her like she was person when she'd forgotten that she was one. She thought about all the small things that had seemed to shift around her in those final months. Schedule changes that gave her time to rest. Card tucked into couch cushion. Way certain problems seemed to resolve themselves without explanation. She'd never asked him for help. He'd never offered. But somehow, in spaces between words, something had passed between them. She folded letter carefully and tucked it into her journal. Then she put on coat and went for walk in autumn air. Julian Vance stood at window of his office on 47th floor, watching city lights flicker below. It was late, past midnight. Hotel was quiet, halls empty, world outside reduced to constellation of windows and headlights, and distant hum of city that never truly slept. On his desk, there was report. It detailed final resolution of Trevor Walsh's legal troubles. Plea agreement. Fine. Suspended sentence that would keep him out of prison, but destroy any chance he had of rebuilding career. Report noted Trevor had moved to Florida, was working as used car salesman, that his credit score was in ruins, and his social circle had evaporated, and he was, by all accounts, man who had lost everything except person responsible for his own destruction. Julian did not feel satisfaction, did not feel triumph, felt only quiet sense of completion. Same feeling when complicated equation finally resolved, when last piece of puzzle slid into place. He thought about Harper sometimes. Not often, not obsessively, just occasionally, in quiet hours of night, when weight of his empire pressed heavy on shoulders, and he found himself wondering what it would be like to live different kind of life. Doing well, that she'd found work, found stability, found something like peace. That was enough. That was more than enough. He had not helped her for gratitude or recognition. He had helped her because she needed help, and he was in position to provide it. And sometimes, that was the only reason required. He turned from window and crossed to his desk. There was work to be done. There was always work to be done. But before he sat down, he paused for a moment, his hand resting on back of chair, eyes distant with thought. Everyone deserves a place where they can breathe. He had said that to her once in cold basement corridor, when neither of them knew what would come next. He still believed it. Perhaps more than anything else he believed. He sat down, opened laptop, and began to work. Outside, city glittered on. And somewhere in small town, hundreds of miles away, woman with grey cat, and library card, and journal full of secrets, looked out her window, at same stars, and breathed. Free. Finally. Completely free. And the man who made it possible, would never tell her. Some gifts are meant to remain anonymous. Some acts of kindness are powerful, precisely because they ask for nothing in return. Have you ever helped someone without them knowing? Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do, is use our power to protect, not to